most important issue facing this planet since 25,000 BC. So, it's about time that we actually get going on this. We've got a fantastic panel. I am absolutely delighted that Ruth Jones is able to join us. Ruth is she is the Member of Parliament for Newport. Just as importantly, I would say more importantly, but I don't think the people of Newport would forgive me. She is the Shadow Minister for the Natural Environment and Air Quality, and that includes waste. And she's going to talk to us about Labour policy and how she's getting on with that job. Leonie is a member of the London Assembly, and in fact she's the Labour Environment spokesperson on the Greater London Assembly, and she is also the leader of the Labour group on Wandsworth Council, and she is also a member of the CERA executive. And I think almost anybody who's been involved with Labour Party environment will have met Leonie at one stage or another. She's been a very effective campaigner for the environment for a very long time. And I think you're mainly going to talk about the role of the local government and how, we need to actually deal with that side of things, because of course, we hear pontification from the Tories about what they're going to put in this, that, or the other bill, but actually they're very, very seldom talk about how local government is going to be resourced or empowered to do what is needed to be done. And then finally, but certainly by no means least, because I'm the least here, Managing Director David Newman, Managing Director of the Bio-Based and Biodegradable, and massive thanks to BBIA for actually helping to fund this session. But also, I met and got to know David while I was in Parliament, and they have been doing, not exactly single-handedly, but certainly with an enormous amount of input from David, some amazing things about encouraging the changeover to non-oil-based, to biodegradable materials and compostable materials. And, if we'd had the take-up and the political interest in that in this country that they've had in Italy and some other places, then we would be on the way to helping to deal with this situation. And David will give us a significant part of the solutions that we need to have to the plastics problem. So without further ado, and with no more from me, I think I am going to ask Ruth to speak. Each of the speakers will speak for about 5 minutes, and then I'll open it up to the floor. So there'll be plenty of time for contributions from the floor. Okay, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And I suppose the sad part about politics is the fact that I'm here is because Sandy isn't. So, it's succession, but it's very sad in a way. And we're looking forward to having Sandy back because we need him. Really important. So yes, as Sandy said, I'm a fairly new shadow minister within the DEFRA team, as he said, and I'm conscious there's some very knowledgeable people in this room. So don't worry, I'm looking forward to hearing from you just as much as you're going to be hearing from me. I'm obviously plastics, as Sandy said, has come to the fore in the last 5 years. Things like the Blue Planet have really highlighted and really got to people. And I think that's the great thing. It's all about people power in this respect. Certainly as an MP, my mailbag is full of people saying, what are we going to do? We need to save the planet. The oceans are full of plastic waste. I've seen turtles dying because of this. And I think it's a really, really, really important issue, which people are really getting behind. So we need to make sure that we are there speaking on behalf of them. And I suppose at the moment, we're looking at the end of plastic. What are we doing at the end of its life? And I think we should be looking more at the beginning of the life. It's sort of, why are we making the plastic in the first place? Is there an alternative to the plastic? Can we reuse? Can we recycle? We need to look at the circular economy. So before anything is done, we need to make sure that any new product is looked at with a view to, so how do we end its life safely and securely? And I think that circular economy is where we need to be starting from. And that's not happening at the moment. We've seen all the photos. And in the beginning, plastic was seen as revolutionary. Let's make no bones about it. In the medical world, engineering, it's all, it's been groundbreaking. So I think what we need to make sure is we harness all the good, but we make sure we sort out how we actually dispose of the waste. And that's the important thing. It's only been around for 100 years or so, but it's causing massive problems now. In the last 15 years, I think the increase has been something like 40%, which is, terrible, the waste out there. It may only be used for a few minutes, as we know, plastic bag, but then it takes hundreds of years to decompose, or if it ever does at all. So each year we know 8 million tonnes escape into the oceans, leading to the death of birds, fish, animals, and the destruction of the natural environment. And the other hidden thing is microplastics, because obviously we talk about the plastic we can see, but there's also the plastic that we can't see. So the plastic, the microplastics, the fibers, the little bubbles, if you like, that get into our drinking water from our washing machines, they go out into the waste, and then they're often recycled back into drinking water. And again, that's an issue. And I sit on the all-party parliamentary group for microplastics, and we're looking at how we can actually limit the amount of microplastics being put into the environment at the moment. Certainly the solution from Labour is we need to prevent, we need to look for alternatives. David will talk very clearly today about the biodegradable and compostable alternative substances like bamboo and things like that. What can we do to put in place to actually prevent the plastics being made in the first place? Single-use plastics is a big issue, and obviously COVID has taken us back a bit, because obviously we had to do infection control and things, so single-use had to come back in again. But now, as we're hopefully coming out of it, we need to make sure that we're moving forward again to look to ban single-use plastics in whatever form we can. And again, there's tension with the government there, because the UK government want to ban 3, for instance, the Welsh government want to ban 9. And, we want to go with 9, obviously, but the UK government, there's a power grab going on there, which we won't get into today, I'm sure. But anyway, so we're talking about preventing things starting in the first place, reusing, new products, what can plastics be made? The road surfacing stuff that's being used now is groundbreaking and really interesting, but also the recycling as well, to get drinks bottles 100% made from recycled plastic and things like that, which is great, because the drinks manufacturers are now actually trumpeting their success rate on that. But the other important thing, obviously, is at the end of the cycle, how do we get the plastic waste back safely and make sure it's disposed of safely? The Environment Bill is coming back into the Commons fairly when we get back from recess. It's been in the Lords at the moment, and there's been some good wins there, but it's a very, very weak bill. Considering we've got COP26 coming up very shortly, I'm very conscious there's an awful lot of stuff in there that's too weak, too woolly. We haven't got enough targets. So we will be pushing for targets on things like the polluter pays principle, the deposit return schemes. What does it actually mean? How will they work? And also, for local government, we expect local government to be doing the bulk of the recycled collections. How do we manage without any resources? What about the staffing? What about the money? There's a massive issue there. It can be done, because Wales is, I would say this, wouldn't I? Coming from Wales, Wales is the 3rd best country in the world for recycling at the moment. England is lagging behind, and there are a number of reasons for that. I'm sure Leonie will come on to that, but it can be done. We need to work together, and we need to make sure we get on with it. So I will stop there and just say thank you very much, and I'll leave on to Leonie.
Well, thanks very much, Ruth. And actually, I'd just like to completely endorse what you've just said about Wales and where it is in terms of its amazing ability to have been taking this forward in a way that other parts of the country really shamefully have not bothered. And when you look at England lagging behind Wales, and actually if anyone hasn't been to Wales recently, you can go and see the way that things are being dry recyclates are being segregated, and it's very easy to figure out how Wales is achieving this. But in England, almost at the bottom of every local authority is the London Borough of Wandsworth. I think it's like second from bottom. So I'm an opposition councillor in one of the councils in a country that is just, we are so far off the pace in terms of a lack of focus on wanting to recycle anything at all. And I think we do need some very strong messaging from the government level. Look, plastic's literally everywhere. I mean, I'm sitting here, I've got a smartphone, I've got a plastic pen. You know, if we go around the room, you'll have pieces of plastic that you're holding. At the back, you know, we've got a tripod, we've got a camera, we've got a computer, plastic. Probably half the garments you're wearing are made out of plastic as well. We're not going to, you know, it's going to be really hard to really bear down on this problem. We are not going to all be leaving this room naked to get rid of all the plastic. Well, okay, some of you maybe, I don't know. It may be a hybrid meeting between Planet Plastic and naturism, but no, but it is a really, really serious problem. And every time you wash clothes, you get the nanoparticles that Ruth was just referring to. It's lightweight, it's throwaway, it's easy. It's in the food and beverage supply chain. It's absolutely everywhere in all parts of our lives. And as a result of it being so lightweight and so ubiquitous and almost treated as if it doesn't matter, very much in the way that, you know, we've been so cavalier towards so many different aspects of our lives and the way that we lead them. You know, and that's why we've ended up in this situation where we are just burning fossil fuels, and we can now see the impact on the climate, and we can now see the impact in terms of plastic. You know, there's almost not a fish in the River Thames that doesn't have plastic in its stomach. You know, that is an absolute disgrace. And then, of course, it all gets out into the sea as well. Now, it is great that Blue Planet happened. When I was first elected as the London Assembly member in 2016, I immediately became the chair of the Environment Committee and said, right, I really want to do something on plastics. And they kind of did one of those sucking in their teeth and kind of went, well, Assembly member. And in the end, they said I could have one meeting on plastics in February 2017. It took me that long to get that one meeting. And we did a very focused report on plastic, single-use plastic water bottles. So first lesson I learned was make it very targeted if you want to start addressing this. And we did something on single-use plastic water bottles. That then inspired the mayor, who hadn't even had it in his 2016 manifesto, to get into bed after I've already told you we were going to go naked. You're going to think I'm rather peculiar. But, you know, he got together with Thames Water and also with London Zoo. The Zoological Society of London has got marine biologists who are going around the world, and they see that impact. They go to the bottom of the ocean, they dive, and they've seen it. So they're very, very on board for campaigning on this. And the report recommended that we should have a pilot deposit return scheme area in London, which still hasn't happened, and we still need that to happen as urgently as possible. The programme of water fountains, which have been being installed, and I would strongly suggest that anyone here who is either a councillor or you write to your local council to ask whether they are going to, and they're not really water fountains, they're more refill points for bottles. There is a counter on the ones that were installed. Unfortunately, COVID kind of interfered with the installation programme. But the one at Liverpool Street Station, in its first 6 months of operation, saved the use of 30,000 single-use plastic water bottles. 30,000 otherwise would have been purchased. So it's taking very practical measures like that to stop the plastic from coming into use in the first place. Most people in the room will now probably be carrying a reusable water bottle. But, you know, it was only 5 or 6 years ago where everybody did have a nice bottle that was Evian or Volvic or whatever else. Actually, the whole thing about buying water, and that's not today's subject, but, you know, it is in one sense, you know, our water is pretty much you can drink it, you know, who knows anybody who's been made ill from drinking water anytime recently. I mean, obviously there have been occasional incidents. So moving over to drinking, you know, bottled water has also been, you know, very detrimental. So we really need programs of water, refill points, Refill London, which is a spin-off of Refill generally, so that it becomes as natural as when they bring the water to the table and say, do you want still or sparkling? No, I want tap water. Always ask for tap water. It's really simple. You can just personally do it. But also that shops and also restaurants and cafes and takeaway places that you can go in and just say, I have my water bottle here. Can I just refill it? And of course, it's nice for them because most people probably will then do a kind of on the spur of the moment purchase as well. So moving over to that and getting a deposit return scheme that works. I mean, it's been years since I first went to the Netherlands and everybody took all their bottles back, and you had the reverse vending scheme where, you know, it was just so easy. Everybody just took it back and you got a small amount of money. But we do really also need to address the supply chain and procurement. And again, this is something that I think local authorities can have a really big influence on. In every single contract that you let, you will have preliminaries. Make sure in your preliminaries that you ask for some sort of statement that says that they are going to minimize plastic use in whatever kind of contract it is. And I think alongside of that, the other thing that local authorities very much can get onto the page for, I mean, obviously, moving forward in Wales, you know, it is a change in behaviour. You have to do behaviour change around all of these things. But there is an element of personal and social individual responsibility. And I think really strong, very simple messaging from local authorities about why it saves all of us money. If you put your waste, and I just think plastic shouldn't be burnt, it shouldn't be allowed to go to incineration at all, it should just stop. Full stop, end of story. And that would actually force people to rethink a lot of things that they put in plastic in the first place. But if your local authority is paying to have black bag waste disposed of, it's probably costing around about £150 per tonne. If you recycle any kind of materials, whether that's glass, but obviously here we're talking about plastic, that is probably going to be a disposal of a much smaller level per tonne. And if you then also separate out food waste from the black bag, which I regret to say Wandsworth does not do, although about 2/3 of London boroughs now do, you know, it's probably going to be a disposal cost of about £25 a tonne. It is crucial for local authorities who don't have the budgets. And also, the less plastic there is in your local area, the less time you will need to spend as a local authority clearing the plastic off the streets, out of the parks and everywhere else. So it's a win-win situation to get that really strong messaging from the local authority out to individuals. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks, Lynn.
Well, thanks, Sandy, and thanks for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to be here again after Liverpool. I think it was, what, 3 years ago, 2 years ago? I can't remember.
Three, yeah.
Time passes so quickly. We're living, ladies and gentlemen, through a whole series of connected emergencies, climate change, pollution, and not just plastics pollution. Think of the air quality we have in some of our cities. Water shortages, freshwater shortage will become the next crisis of the second half of this century. And soil. Anybody think about soil in this room? Good. Okay. Well, there's some bright sparks. That's great. And the cost of getting all these emergencies sorted out and right and getting the sustainable solutions into place is enormous. Anybody who thinks that we are going to sort this out with a cheap ride is delusional. This is going to cost trillions. And not just here in Great Britain, but across the world. And this is why it is so slow. It is so slow because the resistance to spending that money and changing the way in which we consume, we produce energy, we produce materials, we dispose of them, changing our waste management systems is horrendous. Now, whether it's a Labour government or a Conservative government there, the resistance to this change coming from industries who are bought into this current linear system is enormous. I am a lobbyist. I see it every day. We have also to consider that we have allowed monopoly capitalism to take over. So you're not fighting against Mr. Patel on his street corner. You're fighting against Mars and Nestle, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell and BP, all of whom are connected in through the financial institutions to each other, and all of whom join together, they connect the dots, politicians don't, they connect the dots to ensure that the system remains as immutable as possible for as long as possible. But the good message is, ladies and gentlemen, that the COVID pandemic has shown that when we need to do something, and we need to change quickly, we are extraordinarily capable of coming together as human communities around the world and doing it. But what the other lesson is, and no one seems to get it, is that money becomes irrelevant. When we need to spend to resolve our emergencies as human race, suddenly there is money pouring out of every hole that you could possibly imagine. Suddenly there is billions going to this and billions going to that until yesterday were never there. So why, if the cost to resolve the climate change emergency. So paradoxically, this government and the previous government under Theresa May laid out a whole series of policies which Ruth and Leonie will know well: the industrial strategy, the green strategy, the bioeconomy strategy, the waste and resource strategy, all of which are going through their long processes now of consultation. The Environment Bill we mentioned a moment ago. And the bioeconomy strategy is one of those that I've worked on for many years, which calls for the use of bio-based and biodegradable materials in the British economy as partly as a solution to the plastics problem, but also as a new frontier for industrial development, for new jobs, for highly paid jobs, skilled jobs in the UK economy. So let me explain to you in 2 seconds, if I may, Sandy, what bio-based means. It basically means leaving the oil in the ground. So it means using plants or even waste, straw. We're even involved in EU projects where the EU is using, close your ears, sewage sludge, and food waste, and the powders which come out of the grain that they make pasta with in Italy, from which you can extract sugars and starches and turn them into polymers, which you can make the packaging for those same goods that you then put onto the market. And if you make that packaging and those materials biodegradable, in other words, that can rot back down into soil, you close that carbon loop. And closing that carbon loop brings carbon back to soil, where we have an emergency of, if you like, lack of organic carbon, lack of topsoil. We have, according to science papers, 60 more years crops in our soil. Then we're all going to starve. Okay? It's 95% of our food comes from soil. So unless we start thinking about soils and getting carbon and getting organic material back to soil in a big, big scale, and we can do that with our food waste through composting, we're in trouble. But of course, everything is difficult. The waste management industry is on a 25-year cycle, has long turnaround periods. The last period of investment in the waste management industry was under Tony Blair's government, wasn't it? And here we are 25 years later, reforming it. It will be 25 years more before it really is up and running according to the new needs which we have of it. And so they resist consistency. They resist the whole idea of having government tell them what to do. The waste industry is also monopoly capitalism. There are five companies in this country which govern 80% of the waste industry. But soil quality, I turn to repeat it, needs to be a central focus of your policy, Ruth and the Labour Party. A UN report will come out. I'm being heckled here. He or she doesn't agree. A UN report will be coming out in 2 weeks' time, which says that plastics pollution of times more plastic is going to soil than is going into the water systems. So the materials which my members in my association make, bioplastics, you may have know them as biomaterial, biodegradable materials, are a part of that solution. They're not going to solve all the problems. They're 5 to 10% of that plastic solution. Italy is a great example. I ran the system in Italy. I worked in Italy for 30 years. I set up the system there, and 75% of these bioplastics get taken back to composting, composted and put back to soil in a system which is integrated around food waste management. You don't have food waste management, you don't need bioplastics. It's not about substituting plastics, it's about using those plastics to drive food waste collections, getting that organic carbon through composting back to soil. So your job, Leonie and Sandy and Ruth, is to ensure that the policies which are in place are implemented for the public and not for the private benefit as they are now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you to Leonie and Ruth as well. I really would like us, if we possibly can, to focus on possible solutions to the crisis and not just talking about how bad the crisis is. And with that in mind, Also, I'm going to do. I'm going to exercise my privilege as chair here and do something which is possibly slightly revolutionary, and that's ask one question at a time, because it is always so much easier to ask a single question and answer that single question properly than it is to try and do it in combinations. So I'm going to ask the gentleman over there with the black glasses to fire off. But if the panelists can be aware that we're only doing one question at a time, so your answers have got to be really quick. And your questions have got to be really quick as well.
Thanks so much. My name is MP. I'm from the Woodland Trust. I was just saying thank you very much. Great to hear panelists recognizing the importance of plastic, especially plastic pollution in the soil. Now, one of the solutions the Woodland Trust is taking to resolve this is we're moving to shift out the end of plastic tree guards by the end of this year and moving to more circular economy.
One of our members is doing it for you.
Absolutely, like starch-based tree guards, woolen tree guards as well, which will be particularly important for Welsh sheep farmers who are looking for a new circular economy for wool. My question would be, what more can Labour do as an opposition and potentially then a government to push and provide the national seismic change to get bodies like Forestry Commission and Natural England moving into these same areas to make essentially more economies of scale and bring down the cost for people following through in this same method? Because we're just a charity and we're not able to do it all ourselves as much as we'd love to.
Thank you. Leonie, do you want to start on that?
Well, I can do, although obviously Ruth probably operating at national level is probably in a better position. I think it's about making those strong messages about the need to move away from you chose plastic tree guards to wool or wood. And I think it's just reinforcing the need to use natural materials all the time. One of our problems at the moment obviously is at government level as opposed to at regional level or at local level. We've actually got a very laissez-faire government that isn't keen to instruct anybody to do anything, whether that's around diet or whether that's around anything else. And we've got a prime minister who thinks it's suitable to go to the United Nations and talk about Kermit the Frog. So I think we have a bit of a struggle here to get them to actually be serious about anything at all. And I just think it's public pressure, I think, is key to trying to get this government. And I think working with some organisations that aren't naturally seen necessarily as sort of the home of many Labour members. So, talking to people in the Countryside Alliance, talking to people who come from a number of the other pressure groups to then, put that pressure on. And I think it has to come from, because that's what, I'm an opposition councillor, so I spend all of my time trying to get the Conservative council in Wandsworth, who are dreadful, as I just said, on everything to do with waste and many other things as well. But if I want to get them to do something, it's no good me going to as a Labour councillor and going to stand up in the council chamber and say, you should do this, because they'll all just vote against me. When I was first elected, there were 9 Labour and 51 Tories. We're much more balanced now and hopefully take the council next May. But, it cuts no ice. But if I went to talk to the amenity societies, who then told them that they needed to be doing this, and they've actually now invented various things like, litter picking plastic out of parks with some sort of Swedish thing called plogolution. If anyone wants to look up plogolution, it is apparently running and picking up litter at the same time. So we've kind of got them weirdly onto a page a bit of doing certain things. And I think that's what you need to do with this government, is to have grassroots pressure from a number of different angles that wouldn't be the ones that you would first think of as a Labour politician or even as an environmental campaigner. That would be my suggestion.
Ruth?
Right. Yes. Yes. Thanks for the question. Can I just tell you, sitting there in opposition day after day after day, watching them across the chamber is an absolute nightmare. So we need to get into power. Obviously, you can do things once you're in power, but we can, as Leonie said, we can put pressure on. But again, if you make government ministers think it's their idea,
yeah.
And let's be honest, we haven't got the monopoly on good ideas, but if we can get it done whilst we're waiting to get into power, then okay, we've achieved something. But it's really important. I've just come from the shooting and conservation group. We need to build alliances and allies across the board. The Woodland Trust is doing some brilliant stuff, and I've seen it with my own eyes. And you can say, this is what we need to be doing. Minister this, minister that. Please, come on, let's work together on this one and make it their idea and pressurize them into doing it that way.
Yeah, can I just add, it's not just making ministers think it's their idea. If you want to make something into Labour Party policy, making the Shadow Secretary of State think it's their idea is quite helpful as well.
I could also recommend.
Yeah, just to answer your question, we helped Sustainable Soil Alliance, who you might know, write a letter to Rebecca Powell in which we suggested the obligation for biodegradable tree guards and many other things about plastics in soil. So maybe have a talk to Ellen Fay.
Right. Yes.
There was a lady over there.
Yeah. So, yeah, come here.
Thank you. I know this is a bit old-fashioned now, but I cannot imagine the general public, left, right, green, liberal, whatever, would be against nationalising rubbish and recycling. I mean, nationalising centrally, doing that, and also water. I just cannot imagine anybody would object to that. What do the Labour Party think of that as a solution?
I think I'll have to go to Ruth first on that one.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can only, thanks for the question. I can only say that in terms of waste recycling and collection at the curbside, for instance, we need to keep things simple, because the danger is you've got, a purple box and a black bag, and you've got a green bin and you've got an orange, and people on different sides of the street, because they're in a different council, will have different collection days and ways of doing things. And some councils are brilliant at it and some are not. We need to raise everybody up to the same standards. So we need best practice, not worst practice. So we need to make sure what works, why does it work, and make sure we spread it across the board. That does mean spending money. I mean, the privatisation thing, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Bays, which it would be Bays, but, seems sensible to me. But in terms of the water situation, water is a massive issue at the moment. Now, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to be using Wales. Welsh Water is a not-for-profit organisation. There are no shareholders. The money goes straight back into the system. And, you can call it renationalising, taking back public control or whatever. But that's surely the way to go, because we want the water companies more interested in what we, the public, are having to deal with in sewage in the water, rather than worrying about their shareholders. And that's a fundamental, I think.
Leonie, if you had the opportunity to have the GLA actually set the standards for waste collection in the whole of London, do you think that would be a way forward, a step forward?
Yeah, so London is complicated because there are 32 London boroughs and the City of London. So Ruth's point about, the green box in one borough is the red bin, in another borough is a purple tin somewhere else, is widespread across London. And and it really doesn't help, because most people, politicians, live with lines on the map all the time. I mean, Sandy introduced Ruth, and he said Newport. Actually, Ruth doesn't represent all of Newport. She represents Newport, Newport East, and she doesn't represent Newport West. But who knows where the lines on the map are, apart from politicians? But most people don't, because they're normal people. The rest, we all sit there and we just have boundary changes for the wards, and we're going to have boundary changes for parliamentary. So it would be really good to have a sort of nationalised system. I'll just give you a comparison. Imagine if traffic lights on the road, that green meant something in one place, and then you moved to somewhere else, and red meant what green meant somewhere else. I mean, it would be chaos on the roads. So you can see the attractiveness of your proposition. However, I think if you spend all of your time looking at how you organise something when there's a crisis going on, I think you might miss out on some solutions that can be taken now, and you would just end up being bogged down in a big discussion about where would the money come from to make the nationalisation happen. So for me, in London, the mayor has powers not so much over collection, which is a borough level responsibility, but over disposal. And he actually has quite strong powers, and none of the three mayors of London have actually used their powers to enforce on anybody yet about disposal. Come pretty close, because we had one London borough that was doing food waste collections and then stopped it, but they've avoided having enforcement taken against them by saying, we've paused food waste collections while we think about it. We haven't necessarily stopped doing them altogether. Yes, thank you. That was the London Borough of Conservative controlled Barnet. So, I mean, there are some issues about this, but I actually think trying to find the solutions and trying to move people through I don't think people would thank us if we just spent a lot of time on a political debate about the cost of nationalisation. And I can guarantee that that is where the debate would go down to. It's certainly where we get to where's the money going to come from element. So I would rather have some practical solutions, but it isn't. I'm very attracted to it on a sort of on a level because I think it would work.
Thanks.
Just let me say a couple of things. Firstly, we haven't said that food waste collections will be entering into force obligatory across the whole UK from the 1st of January 2024. So if your council doesn't have food waste collections, it will be obliged by law from the 1st of January to start offering them. Of course, then there's a question of the quality of food waste collections and how they're rolled out, but that obligation will come. So there's some good news there. I have to say, Leonie, that I am very disappointed when I hear local council officers speak at meetings. LARAC do their best to avoid any imposition of consistency across the UK so that they continue to have this system whereby the blue box is paper in one ward and the next ward, the blue box is glass. And this is because, of course, they don't want any of their powers taken away and they don't want anybody to tell them what to do because they know better. But actually, they don't. And with respect to local government waste managers, if we are allowed local government waste managers to dictate our waste policy, we will go no further forward. So we do need to have consistency. For your question, Greenwich University did a study about 5-6 years ago, you can probably look it up online, which compared privatized to nationalized waste management systems across Europe and found virtually no difference in the quality of service.
Gent there with the maroon sweater.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentations. I'm Paul Mountain from Worcester CLP delegate, and I also happen to be one of the trustees of Worcestershire and Shropshire Quakers. I'd like to ask the panel, what are the most viable substitutes? If we are going to embark upon a low-carbon industrial transition and promote a genuinely circular economy, what are the most useful and practicable substitutes for example, supermarket packaging, and for example, the hard plastics that you referred to that compose all this clobber at the back? If we're going to, what are the everyday benign, environmentally benign substitutes that we can develop and manufacture?
Thank you. Do you want to start with that one, David?
There is no easy answer. I suggest you look at a report which was done by the international consultancy Systemic last year, financed by the Pew Charitable Foundation of the United States, called Breaking the Plastic Wave. And they looked at a whole series of different solutions to reducing the amount of unwanted plastic that we have. My little sector there, the bio sector, was about 5 to 10%. But the biggest reductions in single-use plastic come from eliminating them completely. So you have refill systems. I think Leonie or Ruth was talking about water systems in the Italian village that I lived in, an idyllic place in Cortona in Tuscany 20 years ago. They had refill water fountains all over the place, and you put your coin in and you get your 5 liters of sparkling water. It was done along all these things. All this technology is there. It's been done. So you have to put the laws into place to force people to actually implement them. So it's substitution, the refills of dry things like nuts and grains and things in your supermarkets, taking off packaging off a lot of your fruit and vegetables. They can often be sold singly, although with the supply chain problems we've had today, packaging really helps maintain them. And as for your hard plastics, like your computer and things like this, forget it. You wouldn't have a computer unless you had plastic.
Yeah. Do you have something to add, both of you, or either of you? Or?
I'll just add bamboo, because it's very fast growing and it fixes a lot of carbon, and that is quite useful for a huge number of products, including in many parts of the world building products. So I would, timber, I think we mentioned earlier on, and wool for wool is an amazing product. I get one of those, fruit and veg box deliveries, and they use wool as the insulation material, and actually you can use it in buildings as well. It is just amazing. So I would say those would be my two standouts, and I think David probably covered most of it.
Ruth.
I'll be very quick. Yes, just thank you, Paul, for the question. And in the UK every year, we know 5 million tons of plastic waste is produced, and half of that is packaging. So the first
Yeah.
question is, how do we get rid of it? Full stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that there's quite a lot of low-slung fruit which we can deal with.
Yeah.
And let's deal with the hard things after we've dealt with the easy things. The lady with the white and black striped top.
Hello, thank you for giving me this chance. I'm Shari Delfani. I am an academic, done my PhD in environmental management and climate change crisis. And also I'm a counselor in Milton Keynes. From an academic prospect and also a politician and a businesswoman, I found it very hard, to be honest, to just get in through the council and do something in terms of green revolutionary or anything in this area. What is actual Labour action plan to tackling the climate change and also the waste management crisis, especially the plastic one? Because myself, and again, as a businesswoman, I have got few ideas from end-use plastic to transfer it to the energy, green energy. But I faced a lot of bureaucracy and red tape around it to just be able to run it and encourage other business entrepreneurs to get involved. So, and also during the COVID, the simple example I gave, as a councillor and a resident, I was worried, and I wrote to the hospital in my local area because 2 drivers has died as a result of bad regulation in place for the COVID waste collection and all this area. So it was in the national news as well. I wrote it to my council as a councillor and residents. I wrote it to the cabinet member who was dealing with, and I wrote it to the hospital. All of them, they come back to me and said, oh, are you interested as a councillor or as a residence? I said, what does make the difference? You ask my question. What is your agenda for collecting the contaminated waste? I am expertise in this area and I'm giving you the suggestion, but they refuse to answer.
Okay,
The
well,
reason is because there is no action plan in place.
Shall we see if the some of the people on the panel have an answer? Yeah.
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
So I think pushing councils to take action as quickly as possible has to be part of what we do as individuals, and also getting councillors to understand that they then have the ability to do that public messaging out. But I just come back to the alliance of the willing, the coalition of the willing that I mentioned before in relation to the question about woodland and moving forward there. And I'll just give you an example from my London Assembly constituency. Merton has an independent body set up called Sustainable Merton. And what the council has done has co-hosted Sustainable Merton together with the local Chamber of Commerce, which is obviously very focused on business. And they've then funded some of the staff through the Chamber of Commerce to help Sustainable Merton sustain itself and to become more effective. And so they've been able to move forward on in terms of fruit and veg boxes that are completely, there's no plastic involved anywhere. They set up community gardens, and they're doing community growing projects. They've got a community fridge where people can put stuff that other people can then help themselves to. And that is by bringing together Sustainable Merton with the Merton Chamber of Commerce. Now, it has been helped by the fact that the woman who is the chief executive of the Merton Chamber of Commerce is amazing and really committed to the environmental agenda. I mean, she's a really great person. That wouldn't necessarily work in all chambers of commerce, but it is a model of bringing people together and actually then pushing. I mean, they've both worked with the council. It's kind of like a creative tension. They've worked with the council, had some small amount of funding from the council, because obviously the chamber members also fund the chamber directly as the businesses, but they've also then pushed the council further. So when they did their declaration of a climate emergency, they've then carried on pushing. So I think that's the way forward for me, is always about trying to make it very local, hyper-local, I think is the current expression that everyone's using, but then getting those creative tensions going where you can start to push the council forward. And if you've got a small amount of funding going out from the council, it can really work.
Ruth, are we going to see a really solid Labour policy strategy on waste and the environment for the next general election?
We almost definitely, because don't forget, in 2019, whatever you may think of that, the manifesto that we produced was greener than the Greens manifesto.
yeah.
So we just need to keep that in mind. You know, we are not rolling back on our green credentials in any way, shape or form. We need to make sure that it's an understandable and easy, a message that everybody can take on board. Things like, and I think this, you know, the question was, it's all about the layers of government, if you like. And we understand, you know, you've got your UK government, you've got devolution, you've got mayors, you've got all these different things. But overarching it is the legislation. So things like the Environment Bill that's coming back now, it's really, really important. That is tight. It needs to be setting targets and it needs to be very, very clear as to what it intends to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, there's a lady at the back there with a black top on.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emma. I work for CPRE, the Countryside Charity. We're campaigning for an all-in deposit return scheme. And so if anyone's interested in that, please link up with me later. But we're worried that the government are going to bring in a deposit return scheme that doesn't include glass, because the glass lobby are quite powerful on this, which will incentivize companies to make their bottles out of glass instead of plastic. And glass actually has a higher carbon output than plastic does. So I was just interested in what the panel thought about, if we focus on plastic, mainly plastic, do we accidentally overlook other materials that are more harmful?
Very good question. I mean,
Well, I was talking. Why do you want to introduce DRS? They don't do it in the rest of Europe when we're already collecting 70–80% of the glass which is on the market. And if we separately collect it, we can keep the colors separate, rather than if we put it in a bin in DRS, all the colors get mixed up. Now, you can have that argument with the glass people. I think that a lot of the big multinationals, you know, what I call the monopoly capitalists in this, are using that argument also to get around their obligations around plastic and aluminium. That's the problem. They use the glass industry's communication to justify their own desire to delay and to stall and to get out of DRS for other containers. The government's already said they're going to push it back a year at least. So they're succeeding. And I think the glass industry is unwittingly and naively, in a way, sort of helping that.
I feel a bit naughty here because I happen to know that there is somebody from the glass industry in this room, but I think it'd be a bit unfair to ask him to respond. What I would just say is that I think personally, having spent some time looking at all the various solutions, that glass has to play a really significant part in the solution of getting us away from plastics. But how we can best do that and how we can make sure that we're not putting more energy into recycling the glass than we need to do is possibly a question for another day. You don't need to say anything. Yeah, we've got time, I think, for one more question, and then I'm going to ask the. Okay, well, having said what I said, I think I'd better let Phil. Yeah, Phil.
Oh, he's going to talk from the glass perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Phil Fenton from British Glass. So very keen to have a chat after the meeting. But what I would just say is that the glass industry, we want more glass to be recycled than anyone. It's in the interest of the glass industry. The more glass we put into new bottles and jars, the more carbon emissions we save. And that's really important because Coca-Cola's, the big brands, they want to reduce their carbon footprint because it looks good for their customers or us as consumers. And also it's cheaper to use recycled material compared to the raw material. So there's an interest there. But, you know, going back to Ruth in Newport, in Wales, they're already collecting 90% of glass at the curbside already. That is the same level that the government want to achieve through DRS. And that's only that's only beverage containers, not food containers. So the government's coming in alongside DRS, EPR, extended producer responsibility, and also coming in with consistency of collections in England. And therefore, glass will have to be collected at the curbside at everyone's doorstep. And I think that's where it should stay. So I don't really have a question, I'm sorry, but I felt that
I think it's
I had
fair
to come
enough
back.
to allow you to give that response. Look, thank you so much for all your questions, and I really, really wish we'd had another half an hour so that we could get everybody who wanted to ask a question to do so. But I think I'm going to have to stop it there. I'm sorry. I do want to give all the panel members 1 minute to say any last things that they want to say and to sum up some of the things that have been mentioned. And I think I will go in reverse order. So I'll start with David.
Yeah, the time for talking finished about 20 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, and anybody who thinks we've still got time to get our heads around climate and pollution is delusional. Its time has run out. Cost is irrelevant. If we want to survive as a human race, we have to throw every last dollar we've got at the problems, and we have to have targets, and leaving as much oil in the ground, leaving as much gas in the ground, leaving all the coal in the ground we possibly can must be our target. And that's why one young inventor said to me in Brussels at a conference 2 years ago, everything's going to be bio, David, in 10 years or 20 years time. We just can't afford to burn the oil anymore.
Yeah. Thank you. Leonie.
To really successfully tackle the climate emergency, it's no longer climate change, it's now a climate emergency. We need to tackle every aspect of anything in our lives that is, based on burning fossil fuels and burning up the whole of the world around us. And literally the world is on fire in certain parts, even as we sit here and speak. So it's absolutely crucial that we tackle all forms of plastic wherever we can. That's not to say that plastic will completely not be in our lives. It will be, but single-use plastic has to stop. Burning plastic has to stop. Using plastic where you can use, algae that has been spun into something that creates a bag, or wool or wood. Anything where you can replace it, we must replace it, and we have to do it really urgently. David has said the time has stopped. For talking was stopped 20 years ago. I completely endorse that, and the more that we can get that message across and make sure it's part of our next manifesto, but also manifestos for next May, there's something that you can also do at local level as well, and a regional as well as at national level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, and I'm going to agree with everything the panel's just said. Good ideas we should be sharing. We should be sharing best practice, making sure we're levelling up. I hate to use that phrase, but I'm going to use it there. We need to be up there with the best. We need the carrot rather than the stick, because the public want to do the right thing. People are saying, how do I do what to, let's make it easy for them. Things like curbside recycling is an easy way forward. It's a win-win for everybody. It's also an international issue, but before anyone says, oh, in that case, if India and China aren't doing it, we better not. That's not an excuse for us not to do anything. We need to be world leaders on this, and we can be. And I suppose my final point would be, people who say we can't afford to do it, I would say we can't afford not to.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to use chair's privilege here to say now a big thank you for the support of the BBIA. And there's one point which David did make, but which I think we really need to bear in mind, which is that if we are going to make maximum reuse of all our organic waste, which we have to do, we also need to make absolutely sure that that is not mixed with unrecyclable plastic. And that's one of the main reasons why we need biodegradable solutions for anything to do with food. Because if you don't do that, then you end up with plastic in the food waste. And we've got to have food waste without any plastic in it. So, and that's one of the things that really they have managed to sort out in Italy. It's not that difficult, so long as you've got the political will. And I think that's one of the things we desperately need to do in this country. And with that, thank you very, very much to the panelists. I'm sure you'll give them a massive round of applause. But before you do so, can I just say, we're now going on later on today in this same place to be talking about overseas aid and trade and fighting for social and environmental justice with Emily Thornberry and others. And then at 7:30, we've got the Green Industrial Revolution with Alan Whitehead and Abina Apongazari and others, and others, and there's lots of others. Monday, we've got loads of fantastic stuff about roles of councils, about COP26. There's a CERA rally. There's buildings, building warm homes, so much stuff. And all the details are in the papers on the back table there. So please do take a slip of paper if you haven't already worked out exactly what you're coming to, because we want people to come to the CERA things. It's a brilliant program. And if you're not a member of CERA, please join now. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, hello.
Is he a member yet?
I recognise those eyes.